Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce you tonight to the main event, which is our esteemed Gemma Tognini, who's going to be in conversation with Professor Gila Kahila Bar-Gal. A little bit about Gemma first. From the rousing welcome that she received, I think you're all familiar with her. And what I would like to say is that she signs her emails to be Gem. And she really is truly a gem. And she's an asset in our community, in the broader community, who continues to speak the truth. I had the pleasure of meeting Gemma when she came back from a mission to Israel at an AJAC lunch. And she might not remember, but I went up to her afterwards and I said, Gemma, you really were the best. And you were, because you spoke with absolute sincerity about your visit. And you spoke with clarity. You understood the situation, and we value and appreciate very much your incisiveness, your support, and your friendship for the Jewish people, for Israel, and for the broader community. On that score, so Gemma, having introduced you, and I said you didn't need any introduction, I'd like to turn to Gila. And I've had the pleasure of a few months now with Gila. And aside from the fact that we have a mutual fascination and interest in nature and wildlife, I've learned that there are so many facets to this lady. She's not just a professor at the Hebrew University in the Koret Veterinary School. She's not just in charge of the Molecular Evolution Laboratory. She's also the director of the Natural History Collection at the Hebrew University. And I'm sure that Gemma will ask you a little bit about that. In addition, Gila is an expert on wildlife forensics and wildlife crime. And as I said, there are so many facets to Gila that the more I speak to her, the more I listen to her, the more I'm amazed and the more fascinated I am. This is a lady who's analyzed the Dead Sea Scrolls, who can tell you what animal the parchment comes from. She told us in one of the original discussions that from animal remnants, animal bones from thousands of years ago, you could see cracks in the bone to show that these animals were slaughtered according to the laws of kashrut. It's quite amazing. So ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, I'd like to invite Gemma and Gila to come onto the platform.
We just met tonight, but we're best friends already. Just kidding. Before we start, thank you very much for your warm welcome. Thank you for letting me be your friend. It's been a really, really beautiful. I know it's like a silver lining. I know that sounds terrible, but I'm so, for the friends I've lost over the last 7, 8 months, the friends I've gained are so much more richer. So thank you for welcoming me into your community. Anyway, tell me about yourself. Tell us about yourself. How does one... I'm going to rephrase that question. When you were a little girl, what did you dream of being?
I don't know if I had a dream,
right.
But I knew that I liked wildlife.
Right.
I liked to be outside in the field. And so I dealt a lot with physical anthropology. I went for excavations and I ran after birds and...
As a child?
As a child. And then I wanted to be a vet.
Right.
And actually, Robert, I was accepted to the vet school in Pretoria. But I went to South Africa and I said, I don't want to be there. I will be...
that was really...
I will do research on wildlife, but I won't be a vet. And I accomplished it. I finished all my degrees at the Hebrew University.
All my degrees. What degree? Can you just, for those of us who I would like to know, what degrees do you have?
Well, the bachelor degree in biology, and then I did a master degree in ecology, but also in physical anthropology, and a PhD degree which we established the ancient DNA field in Israel. So then I went over to do a postdoc in the US, and when I came back, I actually got a call from the president of the Hebrew University saying, we want you back at the vet school. We want to establish...
Excuse me, the microphone closer to your mouth and a little bit louder.
Okay, sorry. The president of the Hebrew University approached me and he said, we are establishing research, basic research to the vet hospital, and we would like to recruit you. And I said, well, you have to convince me why. And he was very convincing, although I had other options in Israel. So I ended up at the Hebrew University having my own lab. So my entire career was at the Hebrew University.
So when it started, do you have a moment where you can look back and pinpoint that you sort of thought, this is where I've always wanted to be? Or was it by, I know with my career most of it's been accidental. Truly it's not been, I never planned any of this, I give you the tip. So it's been mostly a consequence of saying yes to small things one after the other. Was that your experience as well?
Yes, definitely. But I think the curiosity that I had, that was the drive in order to do another research, another degree, because you're interested and, you know, I was interested in so many things, so that's how it...
So how much of your work, I'm so interested, I just want to drag the information out of you. So how much of your early work was field versus lab, and were there any particular, I suppose, projects or research projects that in those early days that really set the course for you, or that stand out for you?
So, my research in my master's degree was using barn owls for biological control. I don't know who knows about
barn owls, as in US barn owls?
Yeah, barn owls.
We have owls.
You have
We don't have
owls.
barns, but we have owls.
So the barn owls, actually, they eat the rodents. And if you don't want to use pesticides, you just have to build a nest for the barn owls in the field, and they will prey on the rodents, and you don't need to use pesticides. Definitely, if you grow alfalfa, which is you have to grow it for 3-4 years, and the rodents can establish there. So that was my first experience. I must say that I was in the field all the time. It wasn't easy to be a female in front of all the farmers, all the kibbutzniks that are driving the tractors, and they will tell you what to do or not to do. When I finished my master's degree, I said, okay, with ecology, I don't see the future.
Right.
I have to get into molecular biology somehow. And actually, I was chasing wolves at the Golan Heights. The wolf,
we all.
the wolf that just started, the population started to
I didn't
grow.
know there were wolves in the Golan Heights. It
Yes.
doesn't strike me, I mean, I'm an expert obviously because I've been there once, but it doesn't strike me as the kind of terrain. My father's Italian and we have wolves in the village and in around the village, but it's a very different, like it's mountains and the border of Switzerland, so completely, like I associate that with bears and wolves, but I don't associate the terrain that I saw in the Golan with wolves.
So there are wolves at the Golan Heights.
Oh, I believe you.
And the population was really, really, really small at the beginning, at 1995. But now you can find wolves everywhere.
Really?
Yes. They are the same species that you see in Italy, but they are smaller.
Right.
So they are the same species, the same thing, but the sizes are different. So I was just chasing the wolves, and I wanted to work on wolf and rabies and domestication of dog. And I met one of my, I would say a father or someone that I really, really appreciate, Professor Chuck Greenblatt. And I came to him and I said, rabies, it's the thing. We have to prevent rabies. And he used to work at the School of Infectious Diseases. And he just came back from Cambridge. And he said, you know, I was there and they're starting to talk about ancient DNA. Do we have samples of DNA of any sort of specimens in Israel? And that's how I moved from chasing wolves at the Golan Heights in order to establish a molecular ancient DNA lab at the Hebrew University. I can say that the professors didn't like me because I came and I said, oh, molecular biology, it's like in the kitchen. I like to bake and cook, so we'll put a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it will be okay. But they didn't like it. And now I'm
just fine from what I can tell. So I just want to talk for a second about all of this prehistoric study, the natural history collection. What does that actually mean in terms of your broader role? And Robert mentioned something about wildlife crime. I mean, you can't just let that fall to the ground. Talk to us about that.
Okay, so as I said, I love both things. I love the animals and the conservation of animals, and I love the ancient DNA and the archaeology. And they all go together because wildlife forensic is actually using the same techniques as you're using with ancient DNA. Because you have to extract DNA from a sample that is very degraded, so there's low quality and low quantity of DNA. You have to keep it clean so that there's no contamination for anything that is modern. And then you have to get the answer and decide what do you do with the answers that you get.
So you're on Interpol's wildlife crimes panel. I didn't know Interpol had a wildlife crime panel. I don't think I'm an orphan there. There's a crime, hamster hit rabbit. I don't know how that works, but what does it mean in practical terms when you're involved in that role? What do you do, and what are the circumstances usually? Can you share some of your experiences there?
So I don't know if anyone knows, but somebody asked me about horns of rhinos.
Poaching.
Poaching. So wildlife crime is number 3 or 4 in the world. It is involved with trafficking, it is involved with serious crime. So actually, Bill Clark, I think, was the one, a friend of mine, that approached the Interpol, and they said, you have your system working for other crimes, but this is a crime that is involved with the other crime. So you can find the same people. And they started a unit for wildlife crime. What we do is have, protocols. How do you go to a seizure of elephant tusks that are being poached in Africa, and you confiscate them in China or in Thailand or in Singapore? And we had to write this protocol and how to manage these seizures. We're dealing with other, rules and things like that. And we exchange a lot of information. And actually, when I'm looking at Israel, with Israel wildlife laws, we have, I think, one of the best laws in the world, because wildlife is protected. You cannot grow, raise anything, you can't deal with, you can't trade with anything, you can't use anything. It's protected from every angle that is possible. I'm dealing with, in Israel, about 60 cases a year, where I can tell you that a friend of mine in England, in Scotland, she's dealing with 15 cases.
Wow.
So I find myself also in court.
I'd kind of like to see that. I really would. I think it'd be pretty great. So when you say 60 cases, what kind of cases is it? Is it from incidents outside of Israel or within Israel? Or?
No, everything is within Israel. So the cases are very, very diverse. So we can have a poaching of a gazelle. And gazelles are endangered species, and so that poaching can be only with guns, or the poaching can be using dogs for hunting. And when you get the case, there's a lot of exhibits. So it can be blood on the hunter's
so you might not actually have the body of the animal, you might just have the blood?
I don't have the body of the animal, I just have blood or meat or whatever. If everyone saw CSI, so...
I was literally just thinking that, I didn't want to say because it was so lowbrow, but thank you for going there. I appreciate it.
So it's CSI but with wildlife, and it doesn't take 45 45 minutes. It takes a little bit longer, but I can tell you, for example, we had some really very strange cases lately when somebody smuggled to the country a Galapagos turtle. And into Israel, yes. And we had to identify.
Did it live?
Yes.
Oh, that's good news. Where did it end up? Sorry, but I just need to know. Is it
So
okay?
he actually last week he flew from Israel to Switzerland,
Oh.
where this will be his home because you can't rehome him in the wild. But
Happy
according
ending.
to I don't know. You probably know about the calf of the lion. Do you know about that?
No.
Lions were two calves of lions were smuggled to Israel from Africa, and
Pretty hard to hide.
no, and it's not just you can hide them, but people were so happy that they took selfies with the calves, so it was very easy to get to them. And one of the calves we got him. So in order to rehome him back in South Africa, we had to do all the genetic analysis to prove that it's an African lion and not an Asian lion. So then they got him and he flew back to Africa.
And what about the other couple?
We don't know where he is.
So I'm obviously an expert. I haven't been to Israel. It's not like a big country. Tel Aviv's pretty built up. Like you'd think a lion cub would be reasonably. Maybe it's in the middle of.
In the Negev?
Maybe. I seriously hope you find that's wild. What a fascinating life you have, and a cheeky smile. I'm going to add. You were asked to work out here. My notes tell me which animal hide was used for the dead. So to me, that's fascinating. First of all, how did you get involved in that project, and what was it like? Was it you sort of unraveling history? I know when I was in Israel last year and the tour that we did of the City of David project, I mean, your girl here was pretty excited. It was just living, breathing the history of the human race, which is the history of the Jewish people. And I can't imagine, did you have them like in your hands? You had to wear gloves, I imagine.
Yeah. Well, I was approached by Joe Zeiss from the Israel Antiquities Authority. And he said, we have about 10,000 fragments of scroll that we cannot put together like a puzzle, like a jigsaw. What can we do? Can we use a genetic approach? So.
And how big were these pieces?
They were small.
So like about a 20-cent piece each?
It depends. Some were larger, some were smaller. But I was too afraid to touch them because it's very difficult. So we went to a shoemaker and we asked him some leather from shoes, and we did the first experiments from shoes just to see if we can get DNA from the leather, the hides. And then we said, okay, we can do it. But the Hebrew University didn't want me to work on wolves anymore. They wanted me to change my thesis, my PhD thesis, to the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I said, but what's the question? What do we ask? So actually there's a lot of open questions, because if you've been to Qumran, so the Qumran, I don't know who would been in Israel and so, is in the Judean desert, just at the north of the Dead Sea. And there's a lot of caves next to the site. And in those caves they found jars, and in the jars were the scrolls. So the question was, who were the people that lived in Qumran? Whether they were Essenes, that it's a very one sect of Judaism that lived there and wrote the scrolls, or whether it was the scrolls were brought to Qumran just for repository in the caves because it's the desert. So these kind of questions were open. So I thought that if we can extract DNA from the scrolls, find out which animal it was written on, then see if we can get to the level of individuals and put the jigsaw, the pieces together. Maybe we can answer the question. The last question, how do we know whether it came from Judea for repository or whether it was written in Qumran, was to compare the profiles from the scrolls to the bones that were, the animal bones that were excavated in Qumran. Unfortunately, this stage of the research we can't conduct, and if anyone knows, I will be happy if you can help, because the excavation that was conducted at Qumran, all the bones were taken out of the country to England, and since we don't know where they are.
I feel like I just got read the end of a book and it's not giving me the ending that I wanted. I feel like, how do we know? How do we know? How do we know they went to England? And if you know they went to England, how come we don't know where they are?
Because
was it very long ago?
Yeah, the 60s, and we don't know. But I can tell you that most of the scrolls were written on goat skin,
right?
Domestic goat, and the area that was not written but put the threads to put the pages together was from ibex skin.
And would that, for you in your area of expertise, would that speak to them being written there, or it doesn't really indicate?
Well, you can grow goats in Qumran, and definitely you can hunt ibex because this is the land of ibex, right, in the Judean desert.
Right.
So in that sense, it was okay to find these two species. But in order to know whether this is the herd from Qumran,
right,
you have to have the bones.
And were there any other, to the point, you're actually, do you know what you are? You're actually a journalist, but a really scientific one, because no journalists are good at science, I'm just telling you, or maths, or better words. But were there any other caves in that area that things were found in of a similar nature that might indicate it was a broader storage area?
No, it was the scrolls, all the equipment for the sect, the people that lived there,
right,
to have the ritual thing. I can tell you, I went to see how they write Sefer Torah today. So they told me, how do you make the scrolls, how do you write them, how do you pick which skin to take or not. So it was possible that they could make it in Qumran, but I don't know whether they did or they didn't.
How do you divide your time up amongst so many incredible disciplines and so much incredibly important work? It's like everything you touch has significance. I mean, you know, I never look at my job the same way again, but how do you measure your time? How do you allocate your priorities?
I can tell you that my students, when they sit in my office and there's another idea, they say, no, Gila, no. There's enough. We don't want
calm down.
I don't know. You just work.
Yeah. And I think when you were saying before, this innate, voracious curiosity, that's a pretty good fuel for the kind of work that you're doing. If I can ask you now to less cheerful things, significantly to less cheerful things, that you have been involved in victim identification post-October 7. Can you talk to us about how that happened and how they came to approach you?
Well, as I said, I have the qualification of extracting DNA from samples that are very degraded and they have very low quality and quantity of DNA. So when October 7th happened, I immediately, that night, I already knew what needs to be done because of my qualification. So because I'm working both with the police and the army, I help the army solve some open questions from 48 wars. So the first thing that I did is I called out the at the end of the Sabbath, I called my two friends at the police and in the army, and I said, you know, this is what needs to be done, and I'm very happy to help. And they both told me, you have to wait because we don't know what is going on. We don't know how we're going to divide the work between us. We will be in touch. So I waited a day, 2 days, 3 days. Meanwhile, I volunteered to do like everyone else, to cook, to drive, to do everything for the soldiers. But I said, I'm wasting my time. I need to be there. So when I called them after three days, they said, no, we are fine. We don't need any help. And then I remember the lab at Abu Kabir, and I wasn't sure whether to call them or not.
Is that a government lab or?
It's all of our government labs, but each one of them is a different ministry.
Right.
So the police is under the police, the army is under the army, and the lab in Abu Kabir is the only medical forensic lab in Israel, and this is under the Ministry of Health. I didn't know how the head of the lab will react because both of us stood in court fighting one against the other. I don't know if you know the stories of the Ammonite children that were kidnapped. And the Ammonite Jews came to ask for my help, and I helped them pro bono. They didn't trust the lab.
Sure.
And they wanted the solution. So I was standing in court in front of Dr. Nurit Public and trying to find a solution. And I said, Nurit, the easiest way is for me to come to your lab while you're processing the samples, and I can go back to the families and tell them that everything is okay, and that will solve the problem. And she said, over my dead body, nobody's entering my lab. So I thought to myself, at the end, I came with another idea how to solve the problem. We solved the problem, and now everyone is happy. But I said, if I'm going to call Nurit and offer my help, what will she say? Because she didn't want anyone to enter her lab. And when I called her, she said, Gila, why didn't I call you 2 days earlier? And since then, I went and I volunteered. We worked 24/7, and I would say that were shifts of 10 and 11 hours. And what I found is that Nurit and another investigator are the only one that knows how to extract DNA from bones. No one else knew what to do. And Nurit and her helper, they needed to finalize the process and get the profile in order to send it to the police and verify. So Nurit said, Gila, this is your section, and I brought equipment from my lab and took one room and organized the room, and we started doing all the extractions of all the samples that arrived from the field.
It must have been, I'm very sorry.
No, it's, the first day was really hard for me because I was a member of a kibbutz in Gaza district, Sufa, and I knew people from the kibbutzim around, and I got samples with names, and that was really, really hard. And then I said, I just want to see numbers, and you change your mode and you just know that these are exhibits that you have to check, and you do your work. From time to time, when we got samples of young children, and everyone knows that we're looking for 2 young children, that was hard. When can identify, because I have also a degree in physical anthropology, I could identify the age of the sample and do that work. It was challenging because the samples varied from tissue and fingernails at the first 2 weeks, together with burnt bones, a lot of burnt bones, and other parts of bones that arrived. So.
I don't know what to say to that, to be honest.
There's nothing. We had to do the work. Somebody had to give the answers to the families, and I can tell you, this is what we thought. We have to develop methodologies. We changed the methodologies, starting from 12 samples of bones, one in a day, and it wasn't enough. We knew that it's not enough, so we changed the methodologies and we developed new methodologies as we went, and we ended up having 50 or 70 samples a day. So the only thing that drove us was that there are families that are waiting for answers, and we are the only one that can help them, give them the answers, and we do it. And I must say, I have to thank my daughter. She was at home. Every night that I came, there was dinner, there was someone waiting.
It's a hard question to ask, but I just, there's not even that much distance between what you're describing and today. Are you able to yet look back and see purpose in that?
I look back and I know that there's a lot to do, and when I left, I tried to train some people to do the work while I'm gone, and I must say, I forgot to say that I brought with me after 2 weeks or 3 weeks my student, a PhD student and a technician, so we were 3 of us working. And every time that now there are samples coming from Gaza, so my technician and my students are being called and they are going to do the work. Some of my equipment is still there in the lab, so we left it there so people can work with. But lately I've been talking to Nurit a lot. We have once a week a Zoom meeting, and we're thinking about, okay, we have to do a real research on how to exceed our success rate in extracting DNA from bird bones. And that's our goal. Nurit is now trying to get Helsinki approval so that we can do that. And now we will have to look for grant proposal that we can submit, or any donation, because this is the critical thing, to be able to get into the next phase when we know that we have a technology that we can do it quick and fast and accurate and authentic, to get profiles of people that were burned. And there is a lot to do there, because the burning brings a lot of inhibition into.
What does that mean, inhibition?
It prevents you from getting the DNA that you need in order to get the profile. And we have to figure out ways to overcome this inhibition. And the minute, I would say maybe 1 copy or maybe 2 copies of DNA that are there, to be able to capture them and amplify them in order to get profiles. So this is my goal. This is what I've been doing for some time. It's okay.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So you're in Australia, obviously. How did you get here and what brought you here? Not how literally, obviously, but what? Trying to pull myself back here, people. What brought you to Australia?
Okay, so I'm a professor, so we deserve to go on sabbaticals.
Amen to that.
And I will be postponing my sabbatical because my 2 kids were in the army. And I was really looking forward to come over for this sabbatical, and I had to postpone it in 3 months. But everything was organized and arranged before October 7th. So here I am, doing some research on jackals, on wild jackals and rabies, and having a lot of success actually.
What does that mean for Australia? But I thought a sabbatical was about having a rest and recharging. Is that how you rest and recharge, by different sorts of research?
Yes, but you know, I'm here. There's somebody that is doing my work as the director of the National History Collections, but still there's a lot of work to be done. So every evening when they wake up in Israel, so I start my second working day.
I do know what you mean a little bit. Every year I go home to see my father's family in Italy, and I always say, I'm not going to write. I'm going to leave my laptop at home. Never leave my laptop at home. I never stop filing.
I can tell you that the owners where I live, in the granny flat that I live, he just wrote me 2 days ago. He said, how can you work so much? Aren't you tired?
It sounds like, look, it's very obvious that you are energized by your work. So are you sort of based in, you're on sabbaticals, so there is any university interaction ever here? Are you based in a lab, or are you using labs, or?
Yeah, so I'm based, my host is Professor Claire Wade, and we are collaborating. The research on jackals is a collaboration.
And what university?
The University of Sydney.
Controversial. Genuine question. How has that been?
Okay.
It has been okay? I'm genuinely pleased to hear it. Genuine. Surprised, also pleased. So you're collaborating, what is the fruit of that collaboration going to look like and over what period of time? And why jackals? Sorry, it's a very random animal.
Well, if you've been to Israel and you've been to Tel Aviv.
Oh, I'm an expert.
So if you went to Yarkon Park, you saw a lot of jackals.
Which park is that one?
It's the park that goes through with a river and goes up to the beach. You definitely were there.
I probably was busy
cool.
buying a falafel.
Anyway,
Shawarma.
one of the things that is interesting about jackals, it's what we call xenomorphic species, because it's a species that in 1964 was almost eradicated.
Really?
There were only one small population of maybe 100 or something individuals that was left in the Judean desert, and now you can find them everywhere. This is one of the canids that learned how to live and thrive next to human settlements. So it's not only in Israel, but you can see it in Europe. So Europe, they didn't have any jackals. Now jackals are coming from Italy, from Turkey,
Right.
and getting into Europe and going very north, even up to Europe.
I was told the bush turkey, or the bush scrub turkey, you know those awful things on the Lower North Shore? I was told that they came from Queensland. I mean, we could get you started on that. They're revolting birds. No offence, but they are. It's a good thing about WA, too dry for those. So can I just ask you another question about the jackals and the wolves? Because you said the wolves from the very beginning in the Golan Heights, they were almost extinct, and then now they're thriving. How come? Because I imagine that area became more populated, not less.
So the area became more populated, but what happened is that the animals, they know how to feed on our
Rubbish.
Right. But it's not only that. I can tell you, when we did, one of my students did a research on the stomach content of the jackals. So you could see that at the north of Israel, they have a lot of grapes in their stomach. But when you go down to the south, where they are closer to the army bases, they will have tuna cans and things like that. So
that's so fascinating. It really is so fascinating. I'm very conscious of being respectful of everyone's time, but I have still a few more questions. You've been presenting and attending conferences while you're here. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
I attended one conference and it was fine.
What was the conference about?
It was a genetic, the society, the Australian Genetic Society, and I've talked about gazelles. And in Israel there are 3 species of gazelles. One species, the mountain gazelles, which is the most common gazelle in Israel, it's the only population in the world, which people didn't know, because everyone thought that there's gazelles in Saudi Arabia and everything, that it's the same species. Actually, it's not the same species. But one species that we have left only 35 individuals are related to species that are in Saudi Arabia.
So there's only 35 of that particular breed in the wild?
In the wild in Israel.
And is anything, like,
but they are the closest to specimens, to individuals or gazelles in Saudi Arabia. So I can tell you that at that meeting, when I talked about it, I said that I hope that this peace agreement will actually be signed so we can go to Saudi Arabia and collect some...
That's a very noble motivation. But back to the 35, like what's being done to protect them? Do we know are they in a paddock? Like,
yeah, they're in Khaybar. It's a big natural reserve in the
right.
Arava.
Right, okay. And what are the... So I'm so invested all of a sudden. What is the likelihood of their numbers increasing?
Well, so they increase very slowly. Their reproduction is very...
pandas.
Okay, slowly. But the main problem is actually wolves and foxes and jackals that are getting into the reserve and feeding on their calves. So we have to manage...
Just shoot them.
No, so you can't shoot them.
I mean, in Australia they're feral animals. Sorry. Retract that.
Well, there are people
Are they
in Israel...
Are the foxes and the wolves vermin in Israel or no?
They are wild. They are...
Protected?
Yeah, they are protected.
Oh man.
But there are people that will say that management, that there's enough foxes and jackals and wolves in Israel, but there's less gazelles.
Fair point.
So the management should be culling the canyons.
Have you spoken to any Australians about sharks yet? Yeah. Okay, so what is... You're here for a year, roughly? Yeah. We might see you for a bit longer, maybe. What are your... No, just no. Do you like Vegemite? I don't like it.
My mother is English, so when I was a young child, I had to eat Marmite.
It's awful.
And since then, I don't eat it.
Try telling an Italian take Vegemite. You'll find out pretty quickly. What lies ahead for you after this sabbatical? Will you go back to Israel and come back during this time, or are you here for the year without traveling?
No, I'm here. No, I have to travel because I'm attending some conferences in Europe and in the US. But I'm going back. Everyone is waiting for me to take back my hat as the director. The lady that is substituting every night, she's talking to me. You do that, you do that, you do that. So I have my lab, and I have my family, and I have the collections.
What does a whole, like for you, and you've got so much of your career still ahead, what does the holy grail of discovery of, like, curiosity is such a beautiful word because there isn't a destination. Like, it's not like, oh well, I've worked that out, now I can go pack up and go home. It's a constantly evolving process of understanding and discovery and unraveling. Is there one thing that sort of sits out above all others? Like, Dead Sea Scroll, pretty great. You're like, was that just like really basic for you, was it? Oh gosh. Kick the ass
I can tell you that my goal now is really, really, really to find a way to extract DNA from burnt bones.
Right.
I see that as a Zionist mission or whatever you call it, but I think if we will be able to find a way to do that, everyone in the world will enjoy it, because you have cars that are being burnt, in car accidents or earthquakes that people are using. But for us as Israelis, I would like, there are some people, I know that just 2 days ago, the army gave an answer to one family from Netiv HaAsara that Bella was killed on October 7th. But I know that we had the partial sequence of her profile months ago, but it was partial, and we couldn't find, we couldn't finish the profile, and we couldn't give them the answers.
Sorry to interrupt, but without, I don't want to distress you, but for someone like me who doesn't quite understand the partial...
If you saw CSI,
yeah.
and when you go to a family or someone, you want to convict someone,
yes.
You need to know that when you say this blood stain is of this person, you need to be 100% sure. in order to be 100% sure, you want to have a genetic profile that you know that there's no one else in the world that will have the same profile. If you don't have it, if like you have, usually you use 24 markers, and here you had only 9 markers.
Right.
With 9 markers, you cannot say for 100% that you're sure that it's this person.
So that's about access to quality and quantity of DNA. Okay, so I understand. Okay. What else would you like to tell us?
I think I spoke too much.
No way, not even, not even. You're an incredibly gracious and brilliant and kind and wonderful woman, and for me it's been a privilege to talk to you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you
Thank
thank
you.
her?